Every week at Business at Breakfast, the second setting, one of the members gets the opportunity to share with the group further insights into their business or enlighten the group a little bit more about themselves. Look, I'm so crooked. Anyhow, it is what it is today. The members can use the time to problem solve or seek assistance or advice from the group as a collective. The time is theirs to use however they would like. Today we have the wonderful Tammie Horton as our guest speaker. Tammie comes from Canberra, Australia, or lives in Canberra, Australia, probably doesn't come from there, but lives in Canberra, Australia. Currently, Tammie is part of the original Business at Breakfast group, like the face-to-face stuff from starting back 10 years ago. So Tammie and I have been networking together for a very long time. Tammie's with Phynix Initiative. She helps people. She works in the mental health space, and she helps people all over the world with mental health type issues. Sometimes it's with the person with the issue. Sometimes it's the carer of the person of the issue. I know Tammie is my go-to. I've got a friend from years ago who suddenly cropped up asking for help on Facebook to do with a daughter. And my thought was, maybe I'll just ask Tammie the question, because I know if nothing else, she'll be able to point me in a particular direction for that. So, so Tammie really, for me, just becomes the first port of call for where do you go for this answer, or do you do it, or do you know the person as well? So very cool person to know. Easily found on LinkedIn, would it be, Tammie?
Yes.
Yeah.
LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky.
Right. All over the place. There we go. All right, Tammie, you've got up to 8 minutes. I'm going to let you take it away. The less time you talk, the more questions we'll have. So have at it.
Beautiful. Hey everyone, Tammie Horton from Phynix Initiative. As I said earlier, I'm an identity alchemist and resilience revolutionist. Now, what the heck is that? You might be thinking. They are really just fancy titles because I like to have a little bit of fun and get people thinking about what it is that I do. And so I do it through catchy things. I also do it through a whole bunch of acronyms. And so I'm going to share an acronym with you today, which is suicidalness. It's a very long one and I don't expect you to remember it, but suicide doesn't happen in a single moment. It's really a slow, painful progression, starting with the first S, which is quite often self-hatred or self-loathing, and it cycles through a whole spiral of things to end up with the last S, which is a state of no return. But a state of no return can actually be the start of something new. And this is where the phoenix comes in, right? Because the phoenix, when it comes to the end of its life cycle, burns itself down, it rises up from the ashes to be something new. Now, why is this so relevant for me? Well, I call myself the original Phoenix because I spell things differently. So Phoenix is P-H-Y-N-I-X, and it's 6 life principles: passionate, hopeful, young at heart, noetic, indomitable, and extraordinary. And I had to learn to become all of these things because for nearly 30 years, I was stuck in a very toxic, emotionally, financially, psychologically abusive relationship with the father of my 3 children. In those 30 years, I learnt to become silent. I unraveled. I became very, very disconnected. And I too ended up in a state of no return. But I decided when I was headed into a state of no return for the second time that I wasn't going to be there anymore. And funnily enough, along comes the Phoenix. So I quit my public service job, which I'd been in for 30 years. I started up the Phynix Initiative, and the last 6 or 7 years has been this journey of finding out actually who I am. Who is this person that's rising up as the original Phoenix? And so I've done a whole bunch of training. I learned to become a mental health first aid instructor. I became a resilience first aid instructor, so I can give you some of these cool kits. I learned about human design. I've learned about numerology. I've learned about all sorts of things because I love to find out information. That's why Misty comes to me, because I've probably researched it. But one of my biggest passion projects lately, which has taken 2 years to come into fruition, is my Awaken Your Inner Phoenix cards. And so for you today, I'm going to talk about these cards, but I want to actually do a very quick reading for you, just for the group that we have here. And so I'm going to call upon the Firebirds, P.O.A of the East, the Phoenix of the West, the Firehawk of the South, and the Thunderbird of the North to provide me guidance for business at breakfast today. And we have the Presence card, which is about the power of now. Sorry, my hands are a little bit shaky. The power of now. So it's about presence and mindfulness and awareness. So for everyone who's on this call, the power of now is understated, because when we're struggling with stress and anxiety and depression, we're worried about the future or we're worried about the past. But actually, when we come into the now, in the present moment, we know that we're safe, that we're alive, and that we have all this possibility within us. So I want you to take that message forward. And with that, I'm going to leave you to ask some questions, and then I'll pop up some links, and away we go.
All right. Who's got some questions for Tammie? Tammie, how much are your cards?
The cards are a launch special for $80, and you can purchase them by that QR code that I've just popped up on the screen. So they officially launch on the 22nd of March, and that's when the orders will be shipped out. And there's some special stuff happening for the 22nd of March around awakening your inner Phoenix.
Is there instructions with them so you know how to use them properly?
Yes, you get a 96-page full color guidebook.
Nice.
That tells you all about each of the cards and the different ways that you can use them to do readings for yourselves.
Excellent. Bonnie, your hand is up.
Oh, you have the deck. Did you also say you have a book?
I do. I have co-authored a book. Let me just grab it. It is a little bit older now, but it's called Garden of Love. So it's available to purchase for $30. I haven't got the links up though for that one. It's also available off Amazon, but I can't remember how much that is because it's a co-authored project.
And last question is, did you have a YouTube channel too?
I do have a YouTube channel. I've dropped the link in the chat already.
Fabulous. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Kiara, you've got your hand up?
Hello, thanks for sharing, Tammie. I heard you being referred to as the Alchemist, and Misty and I have been talking about the Alchemist for a couple of weeks now. So I was just curious, like, how does that apply to what you do, and why do you call yourself the Alchemist?
Okay. It's funny that you should ask that, because I just, while we were waiting, brought up a definition of alchemy. So I must have known that you were going to ask that question. So alchemy in medieval days, it was like the precursor of chemistry, and it was concerned with transmutating matter, particularly base metals, into gold. But when it comes to personal development type things, it's about transmuting who you are into who you were born to be. I don't say into new people, because we're actually born absolutely extraordinary people, but life tends to condition us, and our extraordinary components of us get covered up with a whole bunch of crap. So the alchemy is really about forging the you that you were born to be.
Thank you.
You're
Very
welcome.
interesting.
Thank you. Does your cards, are they kind of like tarot cards?
They're kind of like tarot cards, but they're not about fortune telling. They're actually guidance cards for you to create a life that you want to create. So like the Presence of Now card, it just reminds you that being still in the moment, not worrying about the future or the past, is an important thing to do. If I was to pick another one, the Seeker card, which is actually kind of the start of the journey. This is about curiosity, exploration, new beginnings, So if you draw the seeker card, then maybe it's saying to look for a new path or to be more curious about what's happening around you. So it's not necessarily tarot and it's not necessarily oracle, but that kind of magic's infused into it. But it's really about designing a life that you want to live, or the life of the Phoenix.
Nice. Excellent. Diane, you've got your hand up?
Yes, Tammie, in the last 4 years working with people that have been ill for very long periods of time, on 4 different occasions, they have said to me, I just don't want to live. I wonder if you have, it always takes my breath away. And fortunately, all 4 of those have not done that. They're still around and continuing to detox and get better, which is helpful when they make progress. But I wonder if you can help me with an appropriate response. It just takes my breath away, and oftentimes I'm not near them to just reach out and hug.
The most powerful thing you can do is to ask some questions, which is really what's brought you to this point where you don't want to live anymore? Because quite often there's a whole bunch of stuff, and that's why I've kind of got this really long acronym of suicidalness. You know, it could be that they're feeling isolated. It could be that they're feeling like they're not seen, they're not heard. They could feel like they're in cycles of pain, whether that's emotional pain, physical pain, spiritual pain. They might be feeling silenced, like I was for a long time. So asking some questions about what's brought you here and reflecting back what you hear, because that is the most powerful thing you can do, is to validate another human being's experience. You may not agree with the experience, because guess what? It's not your experience. But you can validate their experience. You can be curious about their experience and then connect with them on a heart-to-heart level. If you have a lot of concern for their welfare, then encourage them to go and seek some professional help, whether that's spiritual guidance, whether that's talking to a crisis line, talking to their doctors. There's a whole raft of professionals that can help in this space, because it's suicidalness is not necessarily mental illness. It can be. It can be substance problems. It can be physical health problems. It could just be situational. If they're under crippling financial debt, which a lot of people are these days, that is one of the leading risk factors for people to take their own lives. So maybe they need some financial advice. So listen to their story, ask them questions, validate their experience, and if necessary, connect them up to professional help.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I had this issue with someone when we first moved here to Chinchilla, because I walk the dogs, golden retrievers, right? And you collect, I don't know, collect kids like the Pied Piper. And one of the kids on the street, we've got about 30 kids on the street. And at the time, there was one of the kids on the street who wasn't feeling that flash. But I had the other kids on the street telling me that, but don't talk to him about it, because he doesn't want to talk about it and it's embarrassing and we don't want anyone to know. Okay. I ended up asking, and Tammie, you can give me feedback if this was right or wrong. I do get curious, but I seem to get curious from a more macabre place. And I asked the kids, I said, what's his method of how he wants to go? And they're like, what? What's his method? Find out. Well, they came back the next day with a method. It was kind of an odd one. It was to throw himself off the mountain biking track, land on a cactus, and then basically in pain and suffering die of starvation in a very slow and painful way. Which then brought up an interest. I'm going, wow, that's interesting. That was all I could say to that. Was like, oh, that's interesting. That's as far as I got. And they're going, don't say anything. I'm not saying anything. I just find that interesting. But it became an interesting topic to have at home with my boys, because then I brought it up with them. And we're talking about, because he was after a slow and painful death. One of my boys turned around and said, isn't that called life? I mean, you can't get much more slow and painful than that, right? That was interesting, right? 12-year-old says that's life. We also had a chuckle on that going, oh, that could be true. So, of course, naturally, the next day, word filtered out by me and the doggies. Apparently, it's called life. You can't get much more slow and painful than that. The kid never had a problem with him after that. The others must have gone out and said something to him. He ended up getting moved, going to boarding school. We see him every now and then. He comes back into town, and he's really doing quite all right. And so I don't know if it's right or wrong to ask of their method, but like you said, talk to them about what's going on with them seems to be a nice way forward for them, because you're not ignoring their feelings on the whole experience.
Yeah, totally the right thing to do, because the more people, and this is the thing about suicidalness, we can be in a state of the more medical term is, you know, suicide ideation, right? So the more we're just thinking about it, but we're not actually making plans, there's more opportunities for us to have conversations. But when people start making plans, methods, time, place they're going to do it, then we know that they're starting to shift into a more active state of suicidality, right? So it becomes, when they start to make plans, we really need to have conversations. But I love that life is this very, very curious response from the boy initially, but I just loved
Child's take on it. Yeah.
Ryan's take was just amazing. But this is the thing, we don't talk about what drives people towards this state of no return enough, right? And people think it's such a taboo topic, and this is part of my revolution, right? Why I say I'm igniting suicide revolutionists, because we need to talk about what drives people to this point, because that's when they're going to fall off the waterfall at the other end, right? Or we're waiting with ambulances at the bottom of the waterfall to get them out. We want to be able to get them when they've just fallen in the river. Right? When they're having those struggles, let's talk about the difficulty of life. Let's validate the experience of the difficulty of life, right? And then provide people with skills. Hello, resilience first aid gives you skills. Mental health first aid gives you the skills to have the conversations when people are really starting to struggle. They're further down the river. But let's have conversations about this stuff. I know if someone had been able to sit with me and say, hey, it really looks like you're having a really hard time at life right now. Would you like to talk to me about what's going on for you so that I can validate your experience? Like, I probably wouldn't have gotten to that state of no return, because I would have felt like, oh, someone's actually seen me, instead of me hiding behind the many brick walls and the masks and the moat with the crocodiles and the fire pit, like keeping everyone out, right? We actually want to try and let people in, but how do we let people in? Well, people have to be curious about what we're going through.
Excellent.
I have a question.
Sorry, yeah, Donna.
Sorry. I live in a small rural town, and mental health stuff's hard to get. A lot of us have done mental health first aid and everything else. But if we have one kid or one person commit suicide, we'll have a rash of 3 or 4 copycats. They, doing the same thing. Like, one kid goes and hangs himself, then you'll find 2 or 3 other kids will do the same thing within a few weeks or a month. And they send counsellors to the school and all of that. They probably use all the psychobabble. But how do we, because we know that happens, and the same with farmers and stuff like that. You have one farmer shoot himself, the other farmer will go and do, you'll see it. It's like, I don't know, what makes it happen? And how do we do something for that?
It's about education and talking about what drives people there in the first place, right? Because people don't want to end their lives if they're not in some kind of emotional, physical, psychological pain, right? And the copycat effects, it's someone does it, and then another person who's struggling goes, well, that must be the way to do it. They may not
worked for them. It can work for me. Social proof.
That worked for them, so it's going to work for me. And we do. It's a similar thing to non-suicidal self-injury, or, you know, what's commonly known as self-harm. We might see clusters of self-harm. Why? Because, you know, and I experienced as a teenager back in the medieval days, you know, a long time ago when I was a teenager, I self-harmed. I didn't know anybody else who self-harmed. These days, when my daughter was going through, one of my daughters was going through high school, she self-harmed significantly. She connected with other people who were going through difficult times. And so therefore they're all self-harming together, because it's like, oh, you're hurting, I'm going to try this. Oh, actually that actually makes me either feel something or releases whatever it is. There's lots of reasons behind the self-harm stuff, which is another talk altogether. But we see the contagion effects because people realize that, oh, they did that, so maybe that'll work for me because life's too freaking hard. But what people really want, and this is why having conversations is really important, it's not necessarily that they want their lives, their physical lives to end, but they want the life that they're living to end. Right? So if we can start to reframe it, how can we help the life that you're living to end and create a new life? Hence the Phoenix, it seems like an end is just a beginning. Then we can start to help them to build a new way through the difficulties. Now, that may be very, very hard for some people. It's not an easy journey, because it depends on what's happening in their bubble of reality. It may take a long time, and a lot of support. But, you know, having conversations about this stuff is so, so important. And every week I run an Alternatives to Suicide support group where people have the opportunity to come and talk about what's going on for them. Some weeks it's really heavy. Other weeks the topic doesn't even come up, and we talk about whether Wookiees have hair or fur, you know, and dating questions and all sorts of other things. But we actually build a community of people who listen and validate. And I think if we start to do that more earlier on, that's why I call it suicidalness, then maybe we won't have these ripple effects going out, because we'll be talking about our difficulties and getting support earlier.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Tammie. Thank you, Donna, for your question. Donna, there's a book called Influence. I think it's Robert Cialdini. Anyhow, it's called Influence.
Okay.
It's he's a social scientist, and one of the chapters is on exactly that. When somebody makes front page of the paper for committing suicide, there'll be a spate of similar type deaths or one-off deaths, whether it be a car accident, which could be suicide, it just looks like an accident.
We have a lot of that.
Or
Very
other ones.
specific single car accidents.
Sorry?
We have a lot of that out here with the
Yeah. And it's
70
like
to
social
25-year-old.
proof. Since one had the guts to do it, now I have the guts to do it. If it's a murder suicide or a double suicide or something like that, then apparently when that comes up front page of the paper, that the town and the surrounding towns tend to get this weird spate of car crashes where two people are in the car on a quiet street in the middle of nowhere in the middle of the night, but for some reason they hit a tree, which often has me wonder about the Paul Walker episode where him and his mate wrapped themselves around a telegraph pole, but they were both actual race car train drivers, and yet they both died that way. One was the driver, one took the friend. So I've always been curious about that. How do you end up making that big of a mistake in a car? Only after reading the book that it sort of opens your mind to sometimes how social proof it moves for other things. So anyhow, there's an interesting it's an interesting topic there,
I'll
Donna.
try and find a copy of it.
Yeah, you probably find it a lot.
Just an interesting thing on that though, because this is the reason why we have to talk about it more, is that so some statistics around the world, every 40 seconds a person dies by suicide, but 20 to 30 people will attempt suicide. And this is the thing, a lot of attempts end up with people in wheelchairs, having significant physical health issues because of the attempt. But for every 20 to 30 people who attempt, you've got hundreds and thousands of more people who are thinking about life not being worth living, right? So the contagion effect, You know, we could say that for, you know, purple hair. Like, why do fads happen? But let's talk about this more so that we don't have people making attempts and potentially having lifelong injuries or ending their life. Because the ripple effect is for every death, up to 135 people are impacted.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's just immediate impact, let alone the ripple effect out from that. So I am very passionate about this. These cards are just a starting point into creating a new life. So if you want to get a copy, click the link. If you want to talk to me more about the stuff I do, then you can book in a Soul Spark session. That's the other QR code. So, yeah.
Thank
Where are
you.
you located?
Sorry,
What was that, Santa?
Where are you located?
I'm in Canberra, Australia, but I can work with anyone, anywhere.
What's your email?
I've dropped it in the chat. So it's
Say that loud.
Tammie at phinixinitiative.com.au, but it's PHYNIX is the Phoenix.
It's P-A-M-M-I-E.
E, yes. MMIE. Or as I'm more professionally known now, Tammesin, because I have had another evolution of me and I've gone to the full version of my middle name. But all of you, because you're my friends, get to call me Tammie.
All right. Thank you so much, Tammie, for being our speaker today. Thank you, audience, for participating in the conversation.
Thank you.
It's always great to have these extended conversations. We've gone a little bit over, I don't mind.